The sky above the human base was soft and pink, with evening light. As the alien girl stepped forward, her skin shimmered a soft blue, and her eyes blinked twice as she looked at the group of humans around. The fire, they were tired after a long day, some eating, some talking, and some just staring into the flames. Her name was Nara, and she was not supposed to be here. Not in this part of the camp, not without permission, but something inside her told her this moment mattered. She had been studying humans for weeks, watching their strange customs and how they laughed so easily, sometimes for no reason at all. Now she wanted to try. She stepped into the light and cleared her throat. The humans turned slowly, one by one, curious, some confused. One even whispered, "Hey, it's one of them." Nara's voice was soft but clear. "I want to tell a joke." No one stopped her, but no one smiled either. "What do you call a human with only one boot?" she said. There was silence. Nara tilted her head, waiting the answer. His half-souled still silence. One man blinked, another scratched his beard, and one woman looked away, trying not to be rude. The fire cracked and Nara stood there, unsure of what went wrong. She had seen humans laugh at worse jokes on their screens, or when speaking to each other. This one had logic, this one had rhythm, this one should have worked. She looked down at her notes, a small pad filled with human humor, copied from old comedy shows, memes and soldier banter. Maybe, she said, the next one will work. Why did the cargo bot cross the launch bay? Still nothing to get to the other star, right? Soft cough broke the silence, and then a sound came from the edge of the group. It was not loud, but it was clear, a small chuckle. She turned toward it, her eyes locking onto the human named Jake. He had short brown hair and a tired face, but now there was a strange light in his eyes. As he looked at her, his mouth curved, and he let out another soft laugh, like he was trying not to let it grow. "That was kind of bad," he said, "but in a good way." Nara felt something warm rise in her chest, a strange feeling, not like anything she had felt before. It was not pride, it was not victory, it was something else. Something light. "Thank you," she said quietly. The others still stared, but now their faces showed something new, not mockery, but curiosity. A few leaned closer, and one even smiled slightly, like they were not sure if it was okay to laugh or not. Jake stood up, brushing dust from his pants, and walked over to Nara. "You rehearsed that, didn't you?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I watched your entertainment and learned the format, but I do not understand why it did not work." Jake laughed again, and this time it was louder, relaxed. He waved to the others and said, "Come on, give her some credit. She's trying, and she did better than Sergeant Mullins last week." Few of the others laughed at that, and the mood softened just a little. Nara blinked slowly, her mind racing. Humans were so unpredictable, so messy, and yet when they laughed, something in her felt clearer. Jake leaned down a bit and said, "Maybe it's not just the words, maybe it's the timing, or the way you say it, or maybe it's how you make people feel, not what you say." "I do not understand that logic," she said. He shrugged and smiled. "Sometimes it isn't about logic, it's about connection." She looked at him, wondering how laughter could connect minds, when so much of her life had been about silence, and ordered. Jake took out a small screen and showed her a short clip. It was an old human comedian on a stage making jokes about gravity on Mars. The crowd laughed wildly, and even Nara felt the corners of her mouth twitch. "That is absurd," she said. "The physics are incorrect." "Exactly," Jake replied. "That's why it's funny." Nara tilted her head again, and her voice was quiet but serious. "Will you teach me how to be funny?" Jake raised a brow, and then grinned. "Sure, but I warn you, it might hurt," she asked, confused only. "Your pride," he said with a wink. She did not fully understand the joke, but she felt that strange light feeling again in her chest. Maybe she could learn this. Maybe she could become someone who made others laugh. Maybe she could become more than what she was taught to be. The humans went back to their meals, and the fire crackled again. Nara sat beside Jake and copied every word he said into her pad. She would study, she would learn, and next time her joke would not fall flat. It would rise like the twin moons above. And maybe, just maybe, someone would laugh before she even spoke. Nara woke early before the sun had stretched across the sky, her pad still in her hands, her mind full of strange thoughts and unfamiliar warmth. She had dreamed of laughter, not her own, but Jake's, the sound echoing over and over like music she did not know she liked until now. Camp was quiet, but not silent. Machines hummed, and voices carried from one end to another, some soldiers getting ready, some officers barking orders. Nara walked slowly through it all, her eyes scanning, until she saw him sitting alone near a crate, eating something warm from a tin. She approached carefully, her boots soft on the ground, her voice low and unsure. "Can I sit here?" she asked. Jake looked up surprised, then nodded. "Sure, take a seat, blue girl." She did not correct him about the color or the name. She sat close, not too close, but close enough to smell the spice in his food. It was strange. But not bad. She liked that it was strange. Did you sleep well? Jake asked. Ty had a dream, she said. I heard laughter in it. It was yours. Jake blinked, then smiled. Well, I guess I made an impression. Nara nodded. Yes, you did. I want to learn more about humor, more about why your people laugh, and how I can make them laugh too. Jake finished his bite, and set the tin aside, then leaned back and looked at her. You really want to learn comedy from a guy like me? Yes. She answered firmly. You were the first to laugh at my joke. That makes you the best teacher here. Chuckled. Well, that's a pretty low bar, but all right. Let's start with something simple. What's the funniest thing you've seen? Nara thought, hard images flashing through her mind. A commander slipping on oil, a drone flying into a wall, a soldier trying to sing with a broken translator. None of them made her laugh, but they made others laugh. She told Jake about them one by one. He listened carefully, then nodded. Those are all about failure, pain, surprise. Humans laugh when something breaks pattern, or when something makes them feel clever, or even nervous. It's not always kind, but it's always humane. Do not wish to make fun of pain, she said, quietly. Good. Then we focus on joy, absurdity, timing, and maybe a little silliness. Jake took her to a quiet spot near the storage units where the sound of laughter would not draw too much attention. He opened his datapad and showed her clips of old shows. Humans wearing strange clothes, falling over, throwing pies, and dancing badly. She tilted her head often, asking, why is that funny? And Jake would explain, because he looks too proud before he slips, or because she says something so serious, and then a pie hits her face. But is that not sad? Nara asked. Is that not humiliation? But we laugh because we recognize the feeling. We see ourselves in the moment. We have all been there. We laugh, not just at them, but with them. She tried to repeat a joke from the video, but her voice was flat, her face blank. Jake shook his head. It's not just the words, Nara. It's the rhythm, the pause, the tone. Try saying it like you're hiding something, like the punchline is a secret. She tried again, this time slower, with a soft twist at the end, and Jake laughed out loud. There it is, he said, clapping once. That was funny. Nara felt something spark inside. She tried another joke, this time one she made herself. It was about a robot who wanted to be a toaster. The punchline made no sense, but the way she delivered it made Jake laugh again, and this time, he even clutched his chest. Do not understand what part was funny, she said. The way you said it. With such seriousness, like it was the fate of the galaxy. Nara smiled a little, just a twitch, but real. They spent hours like that, Jake, teaching Nara timing, tone, facial expression, and Nara writing notes. After every lesson she mimicked laughter, she copied gestures, she asked too many questions, but Jake never seemed to mind. By the end of the day, she told a joke to a passing mechanic who actually chuckled and nodded at her. That night, Nara sat near the fire again, her pad glowing in her lap, her head full of new ideas, new questions, and a feeling she could not name. Jake walked past and gave her a thumbs up. She gave him a smile back, not just wide, but full of something new. She would keep learning, she would keep trying, because now she believed laughter was more than noise, more than reaction. It was a bridge between minds and hearts, and she was just starting to cross it. The great hall of the Zorro delegation was silent, as wind through a dead moon. Walls, smooth and silver, stretched high above with glowing scripts that pulsed like living veins. Every step echoed and no one spoke unless granted voice. It was a place of pure logic, pure order, and absolutely no laughter. Nara stood beside her delegation, her eyes forward, her body still dressed in ceremonial robes. Instead of her usual suit, she felt out of place, her thoughts not quiet like before, but loud and wild, and full of Jake's voice and the sound of his laughter across the room. The human delegation arrived, led by Commander Riles and 2 officers. Jake walked behind them, not in uniform but in a dark jacket with a badge that gave him observer status. His eyes met Nara's for a moment, and a spark passed between them, unseen by all others. Meeting began with formal greetings, long phrases of unity and peace, spoken in slow, cold voices. The humans spoke with stiff respect, the Zorro answered with perfect calm, until the Supreme Elder raised her hand and said, "We now ask if the humans wish to offer any cultural exchange for understanding." Commander Riles turned slightly, nodded, and stepped back, and to Nara's shock he looked directly at Jake and gestured. "Go on." Jake blinked, then stepped forward, his voice unsure at first, then more confident. "Thank you, Elder. I was asked to share a sample of human culture, something light, something personal. I hope it will be acceptable." The Elder nodded. Jake smiled a little, then said, "What do you get when you cross a robot with a kangaroo?" The Zorro delegates blinked, as one. No reaction. Jake continued, "A machine that really jumps to conclusions." Still no response. Nara's heart thumped. Once she knew the joke, it was one of hers. Jake had helped her shape. It was silly, it was light, but in this room, it hung like a sharp echo in dead air, and Then to everyone's horror Nara laughed. Tip started as a small sound, a soft breath, but then, it grew. Her body shook, her eyes shimmered, and for the first time in her life, she let the joy inside burst out in sound. It was not loud, but it was bright. The room froze, all heads turned, all eyes on her, and the elder's voice came like cold thunder. Explain this, outburst Nara. Straightened, but the smile would not leave her lips. She bowed slightly and said, I found the human joke amusing, and my body reacted. This is sacred space, said another elder. Emotion must remain outside. Jake stepped forward. She meant no harm. Humor is part of human life. It is how we bond, how we heal, how we understand pain and joy. This is not a theater, said the elder. This is not a comedy circle. Your culture must respect our rules. Jake looked at Nara, then at the council. If you want peace between our peoples, you must allow understanding, and understanding begins with expression, with shared moments, with even laughter. One elder narrowed his eyes. Your words are bold for one who is not invited to speak. Jake bowed respectfully. I apologize, but if one shared laugh can be a crime, then perhaps we must redefine what peace really means. Nara felt her hands tremble. She had broken protocol. She had embarrassed her people, but she had also felt something beautiful, something honest and real and alive. The Supreme Elder stared at her for a long time, then said, You will report for mental reassessment. You show signs of behavioral drift. Your mission may be suspended. Nara bowed again and said, I understand, but I do not regret my response. The humans were dismissed soon after, and Nara was pulled aside by her mentor, who whispered, What is wrong with you? You are becoming unstable. Nara answered, I am becoming aware. That night, back in the neutral camp, Jake found her sitting near a silent fire, her robes folded neatly, her pad beside her, untouched. Him. Sorry, he said. I didn't mean for that to happen. You helped me feel something, she replied. I wanted to thank you, but I laughed instead. Jake sat down beside her. You stood up to them with one laugh. That takes courage. They will test me again, she said. If I fail, they will send me home. Then we make sure you don't fail, said Jake. Or maybe you laugh so hard they change the rules. Nara turned to him, her voice soft. Do you believe laughter can change rules? Jake smiled wider than before. I believe laughter changes hearts, and hearts change everything. She looked up at the stars above and whispered then, Let us teach them how to laugh. And from that moment forward, she no longer feared being different. She feared only silence, that kept her from being true. The chamber was cold and full of mirrors, each one tall and silent, like the eyes of judgment. Nara stood in the center, her hands at her sides, her robe gone, replaced by a plain gray suit meant to strip identity from emotion. Her mind was calm, but beneath the calm, something new stirred. Not fear, not regret, but a quiet flame that refused to die. Across from her stood Instructor Vel, her first mentor, her voice sharp as glass. You have strayed from the path, Nara. You showed laughter during a sacred session, and you encouraged a human to bring chaos into our peace. This is not evolution, this is corruption. Nara did not lower her head. She looked straight into the mirror walls and saw her own face, strong and still. I do not believe laughter is chaos. I believe it is connection. Vel paced slowly like a shadow. You speak like them now. Too much time among humans has infected your reasoning. My thoughts are still my own, said Nara, but my heart has grown. I did not know how small it was. Before Vel's face darkened, you will undergo recalibration and silence training. All feelings are to be reviewed. All memories involving the human are to be erased. She felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something sharper. You want me to forget his voice, his jokes, the sound of my first real laugh? Vel nodded without mercy. They are not needed for your purpose. Nara's hands curled slightly. You built me to understand life beyond our world, and yet you fear what I have found. I thought understanding required truth. Truth does not need emotion, said Vel coldly. Then you do not want truth at all, Nara whispered later. That evening, in a hidden corner of the human zone, Jake waited under a flickering light. The air smelled of fuel and metal, and the stars were faint behind the clouds. When he saw her approach, his smile came quick, but it faded when he saw her face. They want to wipe your mind, don't they? She nodded. Yes, and are you going to let them know? She said. Simpler. Jake exhaled, slow, like he had been holding it all day. Then what's the plan? I do not have one yet, she said, but I know I must not go back to who I was. I must not lose what I have learned. Jake leaned against the wall, his hands in his pockets. You know they might hunt we. No, she answered. You LLB. Alone, out there? Not if I'm with you, she said quietly. Jake blinked, then looked at her with eyes softer than starlight. You sure about that, Nara? I'm not exactly the galaxy's best tour guide. You laughed when no one else did. You listened when I spoke. You gave me space to fail and grow. I have never had that before, he chuckled. Well then, I guess I'm honored to be your first bad influence. They shared a silence not empty but full of meaning, full of things that did not need words, and in that quiet space between them, something unspoken settled like trust. The next day Nara stood before the council, again not as a student, not as a subject, but as someone who had chosen her path. "We gave you structure, we gave you purpose," said the elder. "Yet you bring us rebellion." "I bring you evolution," said Naro. "You bring emotion. Motion is not a crime, it is a distraction. It is a compass. We do not follow feelings, we follow truth. Then truth is blind, because without feeling you cannot see what matters." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that waits to be broken by something impossible. Nara turned and walked away. She expected shouts, maybe force, maybe punishment, but nothing came, only the weight of watching eyes and the soft sound of her own steps. She reached the edge of the camp, where Jake waited with a stolen transport unit and 2 backpacks filled with food tools and comedy files. "Where to first?" he asked, with a grin. "Anywhere that does not fear laughter," she replied. They flew low under radar, through dust storms and dead skies, through stations that sold strange drinks, and moons where gravity pulled sideways, and everywhere they went Nara asked the same question: "What makes you laugh?" The answers were always different, but the feeling was always the same. She kept a list in her pad, now full of colors, drawings, and new languages of humor, and one night as stars danced across the black, she looked at Jake and said, "Thank you for not silencing your laugh." That day he reached out and gently touched her hand, not with romance, not with pressure, but with simple shared warmth. "Thank you for hearing it." He sat and I sat together, not as human and alien, not as teacher and student, but as 2 beings who knew that in a galaxy full of silence, laughter was the bravest sound they could share. The Hall of Judgment stood tall and wide, with walls made of black stone that shimmered like frozen oil, its ceiling lost in mist and light that never flickered. This place was older than any star map, older than any war, and inside it silence ruled. Like a king, Nara stood once more in the center, her wrists bound not with chains, but with a glowing ring of code, her face calm, her heart loud. Every seat around her was filled by elders, who once taught her to listen and obey, but today they only stared, waiting to crush the voice. She had found the supreme elder. Spoke her voice like wind against ice. "You have returned to this place by your own choice. Explain your action." Era raised her head. "I returned because silence was killing me. Defied. Protocol. I found purpose. You encouraged human emotion. I embraced truth." The elders murmured like a tide rising and falling. "Logic must remain pure," they said. "Emotion clouds function. Fear and joy are unstable forms. They infect the mind and fracture unity." "I am not fractured," said Nara. "I am more whole than I ever was before then." "Prove it," said the elder. "Deliver your case without laughter, without feeling, without tremble in voice." Nara paused, then stepped forward. "I was created to study humanity, to observe, to understand what makes them strong, what makes them weak. I discovered something strange. I discovered their power does not come from silence or rules or order. It comes from chaos, from feeling, from connection." When elder scoffed, "Connection does not win wars, but it ends them," said Narajik sat in the back of the chamber, eyes fixed on her. He was not allowed to speak, not allowed to stand, not allowed to smile, but his hands clenched as if holding back a flood. The supreme elder leaned forward. "Then show us this connection, make your final statement, and if it fails, we erase all memory and reset your mind." Nara took a breath, and then did something no one expected. She told a joke. It was quiet at first, soft and simple. A story about a human, as ambassador, and a broken translator, where the human thought he was offering peace, but ended up asking to marry the elders. Pet Jake covered his mouth, holding in laughter, but the sound slipped. The joke was absurd, the timing sharp, and the delivery perfect, and then something strange happened. One of the elders smiled, another blinked twice in confusion. Third let out a sound so rare it echoed like thunder in a cave laugh. Small one, then another, then more, until 5 or 6 elders were covering their mouths, unsure if they should be angry or amused. "You mock this court," said one elder, trying to recover. "I show you its flaw," said Narai. "Emotion is not weakness. It is a key you have lost." The supreme elder stared at her a long time, the chamber quiet. Again, not cold now, but heavy with something they had never known inside. "These walls feeling your sentence remains," said the elder. "But your memory will not be erased. Instead, you are exiled from the Zoral core. You may not return until logic accepts your truth." "I accept this," said Nara. "I would rather be real outside than false." With Inkek stood as the trial ended, walked toward her past guards who did not stop him, and stood at her side. "You ready to go?" he asked. "Always," she said. They left together. As the elders watched in silence, behind them, one voice whispered quietly, "Maybe we have been silent too long." In the sky, the stars blinked and turned, and the wind carried soft echoes of a girl who laughed in the face of fear, and a boy who believed. Her voice mattered. Nara did not cry. She did not look back, but inside her chest, a storm of joy danced without apology. She was not just a learner. Now she was a spark, and in the quiet corners of the galaxy, that spark was about to catch fire. The sky turned red before the storm came, not with wind or water, but with fire from the stars. The human camp buzzed with alarms and flashing lights as enemy vessels tore through the clouds without warning, without mercy. Nara and Jake had no time to run, only time to breathe once before the bunker door slammed shut behind them, sealing them inside with 15 others and no way to call for help. Darkness filled the space like smoke, thick and heavy, the air cold and full of dust. The generator buzzed weakly, casting a soft blue glow that made everyone look like ghosts. Some soldiers sat against the walls, wounded and silent. Others whispered orders through clenched teeth, but no one moved much. No one smiled. No one smiled. No one laughed. Jake sat with his back to the wall, his arm around a young recruit who shook like a leaf, eyes wide and afraid beside him. Nara sat cross-legged, her hands in her lap, her mind racing through all her training, all her missions, all her memories, but nothing had prepared her for fear like this. Not the kind that sits with you, not the kind that waits in silence. The commander inside tried to calm the group. We wait, we stay quiet, we conserve power and air until backup arrives. If it arrives. He did not say the last part out loud, but everyone heard it. After an hour, someone coughed loud and dry, then someone groaned from pain, then someone whispered, "How long before the oxygen runs low?" The answer hung in the air like a knife. Nara looked around and saw what fear did to people, how it made them small, how it turned warriors into shadows. She reached into her pack, pulled out her old learning pad and flicked it on the glow, soft and warm in her lap. She looked at Jake, then at the group, and then she stood. "I have a story," she said, her voice not loud, but clear. A few turned toward her, tired eyes blinking in the dim light. She took a breath and began. There was once a small drone who wanted to be a chef, but he could not taste food, so he followed recipes. Exactly one day, he tried to make soup and used motor oil because it looked thick and dark, and the captain said it needed body. Jake snorted and shook his head. The drone served the soup to the entire crew. They could not move for 3 days because they kept slipping on the floor every time they tried to walk. Someone near the back chuckled soft and surprised. Nara smiled and continued. Another time the same drone tried to make bread but used concrete mix instead of flour, and when the captain bit it, he lost a tooth and made the drone chief engineer because he said anyone who could make bread like that must be building weapons. Laughter broke out, low at first, then louder, not wild, not loud, but warm and real, the kind that spreads without trying. Nara looked around and saw eyes shining not with fear, but with something else, something stronger. Hope. The commander raised a brow and gave a small nod. Jake whispered, "You just save the mood in here." Nara whispered back, "Then I will keep going for the next hour," she told. More stories, silly stories, strange ones, stories about her first time using human shoes and walking backwards for 20 minutes because she thought the heel went in front. Stories about language mix-ups where she told a general that his eyebrows were delicious, and stories about Jake tripping over a cat during training and blaming a ghost. The whole group laughed, even the ones in pain, even the commander, even the ones who never smiled. The air still grew thin, but it felt less heavy, now less cruel, and when the lights dimmed again, people held each other close and shared quiet jokes like weapons against the dark. When rescue finally arrived, the doors opened with a hiss, and light poured in. Soldiers rushed in shouting orders, but froze when they saw the group inside, sitting in a circle, not broken, not crying, but smiling together. "What happened in here?" asked a medic. The commander just pointed at Nara and said she told jokes. Later that night, back at the surface, with the sky clear again, and the camp quiet, Jake and Nara sat together under a broken satellite dish, eating cold rations and watching the stars. "You saved everyone down there," he said. "I told stories," she replied. "You gave them strength." "I gave them breath." Jake looked at her and said, "You once said emotion is not a crime. Now you've shown it is also a shield." Nara nodded and looked up at the stars, again remembering the silence and the fear, and how laughter had cut through it, like light through fog. She would never stop now, not for Finette, for rules, not for anyone, because in the darkest place, she had found the brightest sound, and it had come from her own voice. The sun rose slow over the new human settlement, casting long shadows across the field where tents and towers rose side by side. Aliens and humans walked together, trading tools, ideas, stories, but one thing spread faster than all others. It was not language or science or even fear. It was laughter, soft, loud, awkward, strange, pure laughter. Strange, pure laughter. Nara stood in the middle of the open square, A small crowd around her, eyes bright and voices eager, everyone waiting to hear what she would say next. She held her old learning pad in one hand, her notes full of jokes from every part of the galaxy. Some borrowed, some new, but all shaped by what she had lived, and felt. Jake stood nearby, arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face, as he watched her like always. Ready to step in, but never needing to. All right, Nara said, voice strong and full of warmth. What do you get when you ask a translator drone to tell a joke? The crowd leaned closer, something lost in delivery. Laughter rippled across the group, and Nara smiled. Not because the joke was perfect, but because the sound was real, because even the Zoral medic, who once called her broken, was wiping a tear from his eye, and trying not to laugh too loud. It had started with one human laugh one day, when she felt like a machine. Now it echoed in 100 voices from 10 worlds and more. Coming every day after, the crowd faded, and the sun reached. Hi. Jake walked beside her, and said, I've never seen a council member laugh so hard. He nearly dropped his data tablet. He called my joke illogical, and then asked for the full list, she said with a grin. First interspecies comedy archive. Jake whispered, shaking his head. And who started it? A girl who once thought silence was safety. They walked through the main corridor of the peace station, now home to a new council built not just of elders but of thinkers, dreamers, storytellers, humans, aliens, hybrids, artists, and builders. Ara was no longer watched, she was welcomed. Posters with her image began to show up, not heroic, not commanding, but funny mid-laugh or mid-joke, hands wide, eyes glowing with joy. Children wore shirts that said emotion is not a crime, and groups across the stars gathered to share comedy nights called Nara sessions. She entered the main chamber of the council, not with fear but with pride, her pad in hand, and her voice ready. We begin with a joke, she said. Every day begins with a joke. The oldest member of the new council nodded as he set down a serious document and said, why did the ambassador refuse tie? Because the cup had opinions. Laughter filled the chamber, and work began with ease in the quiet of the evening. Nara stood alone at the edge of the cliff outside the station, watching the sun fall below the horizon, her mind full of memories of that first failed joke, and the boy who had laughed anyway. Jake joined her, not saying anything at first, just standing close, sharing the silence that no longer hurt. Do you think it will last? She asked. Finally, he looked at her and said, I think laughter is stronger than fear, stronger than rules, stronger than silence, even stronger than war. She asked. Jake pointed up at the night sky, at the ships that once brought fire, now carrying music supplies, books, even comedians from strange worlds with stranger customs. It already changed the stars, he said. And you started it. Nara felt the wind move through her hair, soft and cool. She did not need to speak, she did not need to explain, because some things are understood without words. She turned to Jake and whispered, thank you for laughing that day. He smiled and said, thank you for never stopping. Together they watched as small lights blinked in the distance, signals from other worlds, other hearts reaching out with their own voices, their own stories, and maybe their own jokes. Nara knew the work was not over, knew that fear would rise again, that silence would try to return, but now she had an answer, a weapon that needed no blade, no fire, only courage and truth. She walked back toward the light of the station, her steps slow, her heart steady, ready to tell another joke, ready to light another spark. And somewhere out there across the stars, someone else would hear that laugh and feel less alone, because laughter had found its place in the galaxy, and the world finally laughed back.